Hi, my name is Yana. I read a lot in January 2023. I'm trying to talk fast because, as you can see, there's a lot to get to. So let's start. Let's just start. Welcome. Let's just start. I'm just going to start right off the bat with the Royal Diaries series, and I like them in this order. Queen Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary, 1853. Eleanor d'Aquitaine, France, 1136. Queen Victoria, England, 1829. Mary, Queen of Scots, France, 1553. If you're unfamiliar with the Royal Diaries series, they were a spin-off of a YA historical fiction written in epistolary form depicting life during certain points in history called the Dear America series, which came out when I was an adolescent. And as you can see, I was a huge fan. I never personally read too many of these Royal Diaries series. I don't know, I wanted to indulge my inner child by trying out these four, which I believe are some of the first ones to come out. And then over time, they put out editions from other non-Western countries. But yeah, I wanted to read what came out when I was a kid that I never got to read when I was a kid, which are these four. And how did I find them? At the ripe age of 36. Well, I'm not gonna lie, these still slap. They're still pretty fun to read. I really appreciate that the main meat of the book is fiction, a fictionalized version of a point in each of these women's lives around the age of 10 to 14. And then at the end, in the back, there's an epilogue summarizing how their lives ended with a non-fictional historical context. And yeah, I had zero expectations for these. It was purely for fun, but I do have to say that Queen Elizabeth with an S, aka Queen Cece, I found the most enthralling because this one in particular starts out with her older sister being match-made with the emperor. Her family is traveling to go meet him for the first time. Once they get there, the emperor meets Cece and wants to marry her instead over her sister. And then the lead up is to their wedding where they're prepping for the wedding. She's being prepped to be the new empress. She's trying to blend her creative personality into that with a submissive wife, submissive future mother, submissive queen. And then the last diary entry that she writes is right after her wedding where she's saying, now all my work is done and all I have to wait for now is for my husband to knock at my door to consummate. And then bam, the epilogue says, unfortunately, did not have a happy marriage, a happy life. She spent her entire life with mother-in-law problems, with personality clashes, with the court, with her family. She and her husband basically lived separately the rest of their lives. Everybody was supremely unhappy. If you don't know anything about Queen Cece, I think the main thing that most people know about her is that she was very well known to take great care of her looks, her hair, her figure, and not spoilers because this is historical facts, but she was killed by a rusty shank. And just reading that reminded me of the scene that I still think about a lot from the show Louie with the great Parker Posey, who I think played a bookstore owner, maybe a librarian, but she was helping Louis find a book for his adolescent daughter. And she was telling him that girls are dark and scary, and they need to read other dark and scary things to feel some sense of solidarity in the world. I mean, it's true. This book was that sentiment for me, 100%. Oh, this was pretty fun. The other thing that's really great about these books is that each one, they more or less frame each queen, each female protagonist as a writer. If not a writer, then a poet, or if not a writer, then a reader, a scholar. For example, Eleanor. The thing that most people know about Queen Eleanor is that she was a great scholar. She was one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. And in each one of these Royal Diary series, there's this underlying thread to basically be Jo March's, to write, be yourself, be your true self. Yeah, the fun thing about this one, about Eleanor, is just how inherently dark the Middle Ages are. There's a boy who falls to his death just from swinging his legs on the side of a cliff, a baker boy vomiting out strings of white worms, rats the size of cats, dangerous men scheming to kidnap women to make them their wives and basically ruin those women's lives and potential. And again, like the story of this book is like a lead up to her marriage to the king, and the epilogue is like, yeah, it didn't last very long, it got annulled, she ended up marrying somebody else, had 10 kids in her life. You know, you just read about these spicy women and learn some historical facts or two. And yeah, Queen Victoria, I personally have never found Queen Victoria herself to be interesting. I love the Victorian era, one of my favorite eras, but Victoria herself, I don't know, she's just whiny. The things she talks about in her diary are so petty and banal. Maybe the most endearing about Victoria in this book is how relatable she can be. Since she is the most normal, she's the most basic. But yeah, Queen Victoria, her whole life was just extremely bizarre. And Mary Queen of Scots, I mean, this is the one that I was just the most nodding off to, I guess. Like, I think I read Queen Cece in a couple sittings, and this one, very many sittings. Like, it just wasn't holding my attention. Even though there's like so much about her story. And this may be the spiciest one yet, where she and her girlfriends, her ladies-in-waiting, frequently talk about how babies could be made. There's sexual assault in this. And of course, like reading all of these led me down a very deep rabbit hole of all of the TV series, films based on all of these women. I'm currently trying to get into Reign, which is about Mary Queen of Scots. It's like dumb fun. It's very silly. But I suppose those are the kinds of shows and films that the kids who have read these and who've now grown up are watching. It's been an enjoyable point in time of this month, to say the least. Which brings me to Spare by Prince Harry, which came out in January. Like, now we're gonna get into, which I feel is kind of like a nice segue from the Royal Diaries to to like the real thing. I understand that this is inherently a very political book, and I suppose the correlating show for this book is The Crown. It's one of my absolute all-time favorites, one of the best pilots of any series I've ever seen. I absolutely love. But other than that, I basically went into this agenda-less, and all I can really say is that, guys, he's a dude. He's a millennial bro. He is despite his birth, despite his background, a normal dude of his generation. Like, he talks about his 9/11 story, like where he was at 9/11. He talks about binging Friends and identifying with Chandler. He talks about the existential 30th birthday where he feels like he hasn't done enough by the time he's hit 30. I think the biggest emotion, the biggest feeling out of this book is that he comes off extremely defensive and very clearly from a point of trauma, PTSD, and he does pin it to his mother, Princess Diana's death in 1997 when he was, 12? In addition to his military service. And to me, that is the most important part of this book, where he talks about his time in the military, because he had come from a place of where before his whole life, his identity was an enormous issue. I mean, he's got like a trillion names, he's got titles, he's got all these ways that the public saw him as his image. And then as soon as he joins the military, he was for the first time able to shed all identity and just be part of the unit, contribute. For the first time, I was just a name, a random name, and a random number, no title and no bodyguard. Is this what other people feel like every day? I savored the normality, wallowed in it, and also considered how far I journeyed to find it. Central Afghanistan, the dead of winter, the middle of the night, the mist of a war, while speaking to a man 15,000 feet above my head. How abnormal is your life if that's the first place you ever feel normal? And his observation about the people with the most sense of self, maybe with the most sense of entitlement, have the hardest time in the military and end up quitting, while the people who most want to fit in somewhere, who want to belong to a place, they end up doing really well in the military. And he finds his reason for being, his purpose in life through his service, and seeing the injustice that more people back home don't know about this, don't know about what is actually happening outside their home country. And like the other overall thing that I took away from this from reading this is all of the people who are like anti-Harry. I know that it's really like an anti-Meghan Markle thing, but it's like I'm hearing the shit sandwich sentiment, which is what I say when like somebody ate a shit sandwich. And so their attitude in life is, well, I ate my shit sandwich, so it's your turn to eat your shit sandwich. And I've just never subscribed to that attitude. I am anti-shit sandwich. I want nobody to eat a shit sandwich. Like, his whole agenda for this book is to show readers what he went through, what his ordeal has been, and for anyone to either not believe him or doubt that is an ordeal, or say things like he'll be fine, he'll always have plenty of money and resources to figure out his needs. I just find that to be heartless. It's not that I think of him as like buddy that I could be friends with IRL. Probably not. He's such a bro when it comes down to it. But all the same, like, he's not a bad guy. This book is so damn long. It's like 410 pages. It's a fast read because it's not like, you know, each sentence is hard to get through it by any means, but I realize that it's long for a reason. It's him telling you what he's like. And I love memoirs because they're such a great way of seeing the core of a person, how they want to convey themselves, what they want to be like, look like, what image that they want to put out in the world, you know, like your social media. And you cannot lie about what you're really like in 410 pages. So yeah, he's fine. He's gonna be fine, so long as the rest of us wish him well. And I do. I wish him well. I wish him well. I read Bliss Montage by Ling because I unlocked that magical Libby 7-day skip the line thing that Libby has. It's a collection of short stories. It's got that incredible orange cover. And this was the book that for the first time made me wish that I was a bookfluencer, like a big bookfluencer who publishers send things to, because the PR for this book was beautiful. I still haven't read Severance, but I will this year. And so far as a taste of Ling Ma, because I feel like that was this in like short stories are basically a taste of a writer for me. I found her delightfully weird and offbeat and mystical. 100 ex-boyfriends living with you, nightmare. Hapless revenge, bone broth breath. Her flamethrower gaze annihilated all women's magazine adages about loving yourself, all body positivity Oprah episodes. It could reverse all waves of feminism. Your protruding clavicles collected rainwater. There's a bit of a mom complex in this book, which I'm afraid with Asians, it's inescapable. There was some Asian immigrant inferiority complex themes running through. I was really intrigued by Ling Ma. I'm excited to read Severance now. And next, something special. This is Nathan of Nathan's Nook's book, Adolescence Leaves, that he generously gifted me when we met up in Korea. And oh, this book, there's a mention of it too, which I thought was a nice stroke of Before Sunrise. I mean, it's not one of my videos if I don't mention one of those movies in every video of mine. But this book is basically the feeling of your 20s, that torrential, tumultuous, angsty passion that you can only experience in your early 20s. It feels so long ago, but I can like vaguely remember how much kissing feels so immense. Remember when the sun slipped in between your chapped lips and you begged me to kiss the yolk of the sunrise from your morning breath to make it to sunset? Read this book, relive your early 20s, time travel back to your youth, and then kiss someone really hard after. I read The Disaster Tourist by Ko-Eun via a library ebook. This book was very Korean, hemorrhoidally so, because calamity was her job. It had a tendency to occupy her mind, even during her off hours. Working at Jungle was all-encompassing. The plot is basically about a woman who works at a travel agency that offers disaster tourism packages, which apparently is a real thing, but basically it captures how much work culture pervades in Korean society. It is a reason why I could never live in Korea, I could never work in Korea, but it skewers work culture, consumerism, first world guilt for sure. And even though I am Korean, I'm Korean American and I don't really know Korean culture. like South Korean culture because I just don't live there and haven't experienced it myself. And so I feel like I missed something in translation, like what she was trying to achieve with her tone, because I felt like there was something amiss in her tone. Like it just felt really glibly angry. That's not my job description vibes. So yeah, I thought that it was okay. If you're curious about Korean work culture, this isn't obviously like a non-fictional depiction, very much a fictional representation, but like you get the sense pretty well. Just how much is demanded out of you, how much you're expected to perform. I read When You're Engulfed in Flames by David Sedaris via library audiobook read by the author. I love hearing David Sedaris read. I love his voice. Did you know 5,000 kids die a year from being startled to death? This is a book of essays. He writes about his family. He writes about his relationship with his partner Hugh, which is one of the freshest takes on love and long-term relationships that I've ever come across. But also perhaps this collection of essays may be the worst of him. He's at his most pessimistic and savage and cynical. And then I realized this book was from 2008, so when he was younger, but there are still pieces of his core nature in this that I love, like his ode to cigarettes, which is the final part of this book that catalogs his relationship with cigarettes. Choosing a brand of cigarettes was like choosing a religion, and it meanders through time to the time when he was arrested in Thailand for littering a cigarette butt, which recalled to him the time when his yaya lived with his family, and then she littered cigarette butts out of the car all the time. Yeah, this is poignant, but I don't recommend to any new David Sedaris readers. If you're a Sedaris fan and you haven't read this one yet, sure, go for it. But yeah, I did feel a little bit of disappointment, but not so much in the sense that I'm turned off by him at all by any means. It just made me realize that you grow up with the writers that you read. Like I thought about Kings of Leon, to be honest. I love Kings of Leon. If you're unfamiliar, they're an American band that got really popular with the song Sex on Fire, which is on their 4th album. But like true Kings of Leon fans say that their music, which was like hard rock, was pure only for their 1st and 2nd albums, maybe their 3rd, but like by their 4th, they've gotten way too mainstream, you know, much like Coldplay is another good example. And then all of their current albums are just too slow. They're not what they used to be anymore. Like the sentiment is very prevalent when the subject of Kings of Leon come up, but all I want to tell those people is like, people grow up, people change. They're not like hungry 20-year-olds anymore. They're middle-aged dads. It's not good if they sound like hungry 20-year-olds. And that's part of growing up. That's part of following with the people in your life, either IRL or celebrities. I highly recommend Kings of Leon. It's January, but is that too early to have found my favorite book of the year? This is obviously a library book. I have heard it talked about all through BookTube and finally got around to reading this. I Love You, But I've Chosen Darkness by Vaye Watkins. Amazing title. Very intriguing cover. Oh my god, I loved this. It wasn't an immediate love for me, but because it starts off with, I mean, first of all, it has a very captivating voice. Unlike I've read before, but familiar, maybe a little bit like a contemporary Lucia Berlin, just deeply, deeply American voice that we don't really hear often enough. And it starts off pretty glib, pretty cynical, pretty satirical, funny, so funny, darkly funny. And then by the end of the book, we get to a truly opened up, total freedom. What this book is actually about is motherhood, about the pain of women, about where you come from, your roots, your mother, your child, and that vein that connects you, that generational damage. The main character is a woman named Claire who has a baby that she has a complicated relationship with, it's that feeling where you become a mom, but you don't immediately feel like a mom. Like you see in media depictions of what a mom is like, and you've heard how mothers should feel, but you don't feel that way even though the baby is right there. And yeah, I felt that. And then you realize maybe you don't feel that way because you never had that yourself. Your mother wasn't like that with you. And oh, her mother, amazing. amazing. Like complicated, very complicated, but nevertheless still amazing. There are all these chapters which are letters that her mother writes over a period of decades, showing you what her mother was like, what her mother is like to the core, all the while you know from what the main character says about how her mother ends up in life. And you get that sense of missed promise, missed potential. Oh, I really love this. I can wholeheartedly claim that this is definitely in my top 10 at the very least, if not all the way up to 1. I'm so intrigued by Claire Vaye Watkins. I need more Claire Vaye Watkins. Couldn't we be decent and loyal and at the same time completely free? Isn't the best kind of life one where all kinds of things happen? I read The Dutch House by Anne Patchett via library audiobook, which was read by Tom Hanks, but I do have a physical copy of this book. I mean, this cover is iconic. It's so famous. I'm pretty sure that most of the people who bought this book for this cover. It's just so striking. Like you saw this cover everywhere. It's gorgeous. I never really knew about Anne Patchett until last year when I read These Precious Days, the essay from Harper's Magazine that is the title story of her collection of essays, which I loved. It was one of my favorite books I read last year. That was my very first Anne Patchett. I've heard that fiction Anne Patchett is a little on the dull side, so I was a little wary about reading any of them, but I don't know why, but sometime this month I just went through like a Tom Hanks phase and I just wanted to listen to that soothing, comforting voice just reading to me. And his audiobook performance is very good, like maybe too good, because it was a little hard to actually focus on the story at first. But once I actually started to focus on the story, like, wow, like, what a story. Yeah, I like this a lot, actually. Anne Patchett, both fiction and nonfiction, Anne Patchett's voice is one of those grown-up voices, like extremely mature, extremely grounded, very much a reality-based, nevertheless extremely empathetic. She's an immensely talented writer who does the hard work, like telling stories for your benefit. She serves you all 5 vegetables in one meal. So in this case, that lesson that she wants to impart to you is basically get a fucking will. No matter what you do, if you have stuff to inherit, get a will. And practice forgiveness. And maybe don't be such a man. Yeah, this is extremely plotty with very unlikable characters, but it's got some pleasant, cool story grandma vibes. Yeah, I like this a lot. After I finished reading it, I was a little bit shaking with rage. And just like sitting in silence and dwelling on it for a while. Yeah, I recommend. If you're in the mood for that, I recommend highly. The next 2 books I also read via library audiobook. Both of these read by the authors, though I do have the physical copies already and their rereads. I bought both of these when they came out, and even though Nora Ephron's book came out in 2006 and Tom Hanks' book came out in 2017, I still think of these 2 together. Like they're side by side on my shelves and I always think of these 2 together. But I'll start with the Tom Hanks Uncommon Type, Some Stories by Tom Hanks. This is yet another example of just how stupidly talented Tom Hanks is. He has such a classic American voice. Take off your clothes. I did. When she took off hers, I was a goner. And then straight into some harrowing World War II stories. Yeah, this is quintessential Americana. If you've never read this, I really highly recommend. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I don't know why. It's just, I don't think anything negative about this. It's just delightful. There's a great indignant film press tour skewering a freshly divorcee who greets her pride, her joy, a massive espresso maker. And she greets this every morning with a hello, big boy. Of course, he talks about typewriters a lot. There's space travel. There is a great short story about involving time travel in this book that I maybe think about once a week. That still haunts me to this day ever since I first read it. Yeah, this is tightly edited. Every short story packs a punch. What can't this man do? And yes, I highly recommend the audiobook as well. I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman by Nora Ephron. One of my absolute favorite books of all time. It's very slim. I think the audiobook was only 3 hours. To me, this is the epitome of a celebrity memoir full of funny, heartfelt, fun anecdotes sprinkled with gossip, just an abundance of life. There's a hilarious JFK chapter, there's a Bennington College chapter, there's a wonderful ode to books. Don't they know I'm doing something much more important right now? I'm reading the most wonderful book. This book also feels like a time capsule of Manhattan, of an era of Manhattan that'll never exist anymore in today's corporate world, unfortunately. She is also a woman who loves houses. She talks about how men can come and go, but not the house. And yes, I've read this so many times. I know this book very well, but listening to it on audiobook read by her for the first time, I felt as if she's come back to life in my kitchen as I'm cooking dinner, talking to me in her charming, dry, ironic, indignant, witty voice. Yes, it's all very much like rich white women problems, but ones that I will never have. But damn, is she fun to listen to. Oh, I told you there was a lot to go through. And this is a great January reading month. Had some great fiction, great nonfiction, YA, memoirs, short stories, a novella, essays, possibly already unearthed my #1 favorite book of the year. So yeah, this is a great start. I hope you all also had a great reading month. Thank you so much for watching and sticking along this far. And I'll see you guys again very soon.